and welcome to Friends That Invest. You're joined today by your host, Sim. I'm a financial author and investor, and I am here to teach you about all things investing and personal finance. Today's episode is brought to you by a book that I read. I have read this book before. It is called The Millionaire Next Door, but I think I just needed a little bit of a reminder personally. And I thought, what not better than to also give a reminder to the investing besties that might just be feeling like their spending's getting a little bit out of control. The splurges are getting a little bit higher. They're shopping maybe at the fancier stores recently, and there's nothing wrong. Look, there's nothing wrong with living a nice life. There's nothing wrong with treating yourself to nice things. But sometimes you and I, we both know deep down, sometimes we're just treating ourselves a little too much, or we're just spending a little bit too much, and making sure that we are just balancing that out and bringing ourselves back down to earth it's never a bad thing. But I was listening to the book. I was reading the book. I was on the plane. And funnily enough, I was with my husband, and he saw that I was reading the book because every time I would see something I liked, I paused it, I would look at him and I'd be like, we need to cut down on this. We need to stop spending on this. How often do you use your Hulu account? We need to get rid of that. We don't really use Disney Plus anymore. And he more than once tried to take the book off me, and I was like, no, this is important. And he was like, I just don't like who you become when you get into these ruts. And I was like, this is not a rut. This is important. But nonetheless, I'm going to share with you the top 3 lessons that I've learned from this book. So you don't have to read the book. You can just enjoy the podcast episode. Just go for a walk, do your laundry, have a little bit of fun. Maybe you're driving to work and you're like, maybe I'm just not going to spend that extra money that I thought I would. So without further ado, let's get into the first lesson. The first lesson that I took away from this book was that wealthy people are not the people that you see as wealthy. They are completely different. In the book, the author goes to wealthy suburbs because he's like, I need to interview some rich people. And so he goes to these suburbs and he's like, you know what? I'm going to go to the places where the houses are the nicest. There's fancy cars, the people that have, the G-Wagons, and they have the big homes and the pool and spa, just next level wealth. And he goes and he starts interviewing them. And in the interviews, he's realizing, okay, these people don't actually have that much invested or cash. Yes, they might be a doctor that is making $400,000 a year or $500,000 a year or even $1 million a year. But these people are spending $500,000 a year. They are spending $1 million a year, and there is nothing left over. They are just one bad property cycle away from all of it crashing down. And they are so stressed up to their eyeballs because yes, they're making a lot of money, but they're also spending so much. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. Because when you think of the rich people in your life, not the people who look rich in your life, the people that you have spoken to that are yeah, I have 6 figures in the share market, or I actually have a retirement portfolio that is almost at $1 million or over $1 million, and you look at them, they are often not what you expect. They're not the person with the big house in Bel Air. They're not the person that has a full stack of Cartier bracelets. I don't even feel that's really a sign of wealth anymore. It used to be when we were younger. But the Millionaire Next Door looked and found the people that were actually wealthy, the people that could stop working, the people that had millions invested, the people that were really liquid rich and asset rich, as opposed to just, asset rich but having no liquid wealth. They were the people that fit this certain criteria. Now, this is what the average of them look like. And again, remember that this book came out many years ago. So it might be slightly skewed to rich millionaire next doors that are men. But this is what he said. They were on average 57 years old, not 21, not 25, not 30, 57 years old. They had a household income of around $247,000. That was the average, but the median was $131,000 household income, so husband and wife together. Their household net worth, however, despite their average income being $247,000 as a household, their average net worth was $3.7 million. Think about that. They weren't making millions of dollars in their salary. They were making as a family, like maybe one partner made 100K and the other partner made 147K. Still a lot of money, but $3.7 million invested, huge. So the median is a lot lower because some people are like ultra wealthy, and that's like pushed out the average. Their professions were often self-employed. About 50% were self-employed, 80% was self-made. They didn't come from like rich parents. They probably came from parents that encouraged education and encouraged like hard work, but not necessarily like super wealthy parents that had trust funds. And often their businesses that they owned were not flashy businesses. They were like very normal blue collar or like steady businesses, like owning an accounting firm or having a paving company or a pest control company, or maybe they were like contracting bookkeeping. They weren't really like flashy companies that they were owning. It wasn't like a big high rise, on like the 57th level of a building. It was just like very, well, how do you say it? Like down to earth companies, like stock standard companies. And then they found that in terms of their spending, they would typically avoid car loans. They would buy reliable and used cars rather than brand new cars. They spent a lot of their time budgeting and planning their investments. And they put a lot of energy, a significant amount of energy, into growing their net worth rather than displaying their status. And it was a good reminder, this lesson, because it is so easy, myself included. And like when I think about my own journey, like there was one year where I made a really large amount of money, like more than I'd made. It was like a multi-six-figure year. It was like over 200K, I think. Yeah, over 200K. And I remember like thinking, oh yeah, this is great. And I was kind of like looking around and being like, my life is not that different though. Like after taxes and after putting like, more than 50, 60, sometimes 70% away into shares, I'm not left with a lot to like go spend and like splurge and like drip myself in, I don't know, Gucci and Prada. And I just didn't understand it. And I was like, how are people affording this kind of life? Because I thought that was the money that you needed to live that kind of life. It's just too much. And that's when I kind of realized, okay, a lot of these people are spending big and they are not putting money away. They are spending big and they are not creating liquid wealth and assets that are income producing, and they have to keep this up. Whereas when I think about some of my friends that have like are on their way to FIRE or have achieved FIRE, they like dress very normally. They have like a nice car, but not a crate. Like they have the same car as me. They have like a Tesla. They aren't driving Lamborghinis that like make really loud noises. No offense, Lamborghinis. I mean, I would drive one. I would happily drive one. They're making choices and they're choosing to be more low-key and frugal and not show their wealth outwardly. But you go to their house and it's a nice house. And so what I found in that lesson was like, it's okay if you look at people online and they have a nice life and you're like, that could be cool. I'd like that. I'd like a nice house one day. I'd like a nice car one day. But just know that when people are making those decisions, that's a decision where they're not investing that money. That's a decision where they're not putting that money away. And it's okay to make those choices, but there is a trade-off. And they might work, 5 more years to live that kind of lifestyle, whereas maybe you don't have to work as long as they do, and you have more free time and you have more choice. It kind of comes down to, what you want. The second lesson that I learned from this book, and this one was kind of controversial. I did a post on Instagram where I was like, hey, the Millionaire Next Door has this calculation and it helps you figure out if you fall into one of two categories. And the calculation is to understand, do you save a lot more compared to your annual income? And so what you do is you take your age and you times it by your annual household income, and then you divide that by 10. So for example, let's say you're 40 years old, you make 100K pre-tax salary, times that by each other. So that's about, oh my God, I'm never good at math, 4 million. I don't know why that took me so long, $4 million. And then you divide that by 10. And so that's 400K. And so if you're a 40-year-old making 100K as a household income, then your essential net worth should be 400K or more. And if you are someone that has more than 400K or even double that, let's say you've invested, you have some home equity, you have your retirement fund, you've like also started investing in like index funds and shares, and your net worth is actually 800K as a household, then you are considered what is called a prodigious accumulator of wealth, also known as a PAW, P-A-W. And PAWs are people that have made significant amounts of wealth despite maybe not having a high income. They've made a significant amount of wealth despite their income being slightly lower because they have made choices to invest most of it. And like they've chosen to live in a low cost area. They've chosen to not spend as much on other things and they're just shoveling money away. That's a great thing. The opposite of that is what's called a under-accumulator of wealth, or a UAW. And these are high earners. Let's say like someone has 300K in salary, huge salary. They're 30 years old. They're like living life. They're on the top of the world. Using the assumptions, they should have $900,000 invested in terms of their net worth. That includes their portfolio and shares, their retirement fund, their home, their property, all of that. Maybe their cars, all of that, 900K. And if they don't have that, then they are considered a under-accumulator of wealth because they are prioritizing spending more than putting money away. Maybe they value status, maybe they have consumer debt, maybe they have a high consumption lifestyle, maybe they live in a high cost of living area. And anyway, I put this post up and there was actually a fair amount of constructive feedback where people were like, this doesn't really account for, like, if you are younger and have just started, it doesn't really account for if you've taken career breaks, it doesn't account for if you're like, you know, income has changed over the years. And it's just like not super, I mean, the people that had a high answer, the PAWs, the PAWs, they were like, this is awesome. But a lot of people that didn't quite fall into that, they were like, this is not that helpful. So, you know, without a doubt, take it with a grain of salt. It's just a very simple and like quick and easy way of understanding where you sit. It's not the like entirety of your financial situation. It cannot be summarized, you know, by a simple equation, but it's a good place to start to understand by the definition of the Millionaire Next Door. Where do you sit? Are you someone that has invested and saved more despite your salary? Or are you someone that even though you earn a high salary, you're still perhaps spending more than you realize or than you should? So it's something you take into account. And personally, you will know, like if you get the answer and you're like, okay, this is lower than I thought. And you also like look around and you have like lots of nice things and you haven't really prioritized investing, then, you know, maybe it's, if the shoe fits, you know, it fits. And if it doesn't, you're like, actually, there's all these other reasons, then that also explains it too. So don't take it too like deeply, but I just thought it was a fun, easy way of kind of getting a base idea of where you're at. And the third lesson that I took away from the Millionaire Next Door, and this was honestly one that I was very surprised by the first time I heard it, and it was a good reminder the second time I heard it, is that often the highest spenders are people that have professional degrees. Now, you might not know this, but in my past life, I was an optometrist. And so I have kind of this profile of a person. I mean, I'm kind of putting all of us in a broad brush stroke, but I'm the kind of person that has probably spent more time in uni than the average person. So my university was 5 years long. You're probably more academically inclined. So you like are maybe a perfectionist. You try to study really hard. You probably care about status a little bit as well as helping people. And putting that all into a box, and you have like more student loans, you kind of go into these degrees like law or medicine or optometry or pharmacy. You go into these things thinking like, I'm going to be a high income earner. I've put in all the time and effort. I've, you know, slogged away, especially our doctor friends. They've slogged away. They've worked so hard. And now you can finally make a money. Now you're like a dentist, you know, now you can actually do these things. And our typical profile is that we end up spending because we're like, I am 28 and I've finally started my first full-time job. I'm going to make sure that I buy myself a nice BMW. I am a doctor now. I have like a high, not status in society, that's the wrong way to put it, but you think I should prove to other people visually that I'm really good as a doctor or really good as a lawyer. Let me buy the nice things. And so as a result, these highly professional careers, which a lot of our investy besties are, end up having some of the worst relationships with money because they feel the pressure to spend more and they're catching up and they have high student loan debt. It's not like they're just naturally bad with money. It's like a perfect storm of things that makes it easier to spend more and to not really prioritize saving and investing. And honestly, it is something I can really sympathize with because to a degree, if I am going to a hospital and I have a surgery and I pull up, and you know how you can see like the doctor car parks? I pull up, and if my doctor who's doing my surgery turns up in like a Honda Accord and it looks like it's seen better days and the paint is chipping a little bit, I'm not going to be like, oh, they're poor. Like they're a good investor. They save, like they probably have a huge index fund. I'm probably going to think, oh no. Versus if I like go into my surgery and I park and I see the doctor car parks and there's like a Lamborghini, or maybe even just like, doctors don't drive Lamborghinis. What am I talking about? Maybe they drive like a nice, clean Audi SUV. I'm going to be like, that's a respectable doctor. She has done good surgeries. She gets paid really well. She probably hasn't been sued for malpractice. And so there is that element of you have to, when you have a professional career, you probably have to have some level of looking put together or like showcasing sort of smaller symbols of status, because they, in our like monkey brain, we kind of correlate those things with they're good at their job. Same with real estate agents. Like, have you noticed real estate agents always have flashy cars? It kind of makes sense. If you're selling your house, do you want the agent that comes in a nice car with like a flash fitted suit? Do you want her to sell your house? Probably, because you're thinking she probably gets really good prices for the houses that she sells, so I'll work with her, versus the agent that, I don't know, has the sim fit that wears like a black top, jeans, and has their hair in a messy bun and turns up, you know, in a Suzuki Swift. You'd be like, oh, like, I'm sure she's you're not going to be like, she's a poor, she's like investing all of her money. You're going to be like, is this her like first house? Is this like her first, you know, big sale? And so we do kind of judge people based on how they look. And so therefore I'm not like trying to sit here and say, stop spending money, live off like noodles. If you have like old clothes, only wear your old clothes, don't upgrade your car. I think there is a balance, because if you are in a profession where people judge you based on how you look, or perhaps how you present yourself, whether that's even like just more smaller symbols of status, I think that there are ways to showcase that if it affects your professional career. But like, it must be just so nice being like a guy that owns a panel beating company and they own like 10 of them and they can like oh my God, should I share that? Yeah, I'll share the story. I once had a friend, and my friend's relative, I thought he worked at the petrol station because he dressed like someone that worked at a petrol station. And I remember we were at like a meeting. It was like a youth group meeting. And he was like, all right, well, I got to go do like my petrol station shift now. And this was like a Sunday at 4 p.m. And I was like, poor guy. Like, that's rough, you know, like he's in his 40s and he's working at the petrol station and he seems lovely. You know, he had a beanie on and shorts and all of that. Later on, I then had my first job at my friend's cousin's petrol station. And I got the job. That man owned not just that petrol station, but like 7 other petrol stations. He was going to his petrol station that he owned, not the petrol station that he worked in. And yet you would never have known. And when he would walk in, when we were like staff and we were working there, when he would walk in, someone might think like, you know, just a guy. He was the owner. And so in some cases, it is just easier to look and live kind of under the radar. But for a lot of us, especially women, because we do definitely judge women on how they look, there is, I think, more of a balancing act. So with that, I hope you found this episode helpful. We talked about what wealthy people do. They're not usually the flashy ones. They're usually the ones that maybe live a little bit more modestly. We talked about the 2 types. We talked about the poors and the under accumulators of wealth. And we talked about how sometimes it's the professionals that end up spending more because there is more pressure to do so. and we spoke about my former boss. So with that, I will leave you to it. I hope you found this episode helpful, and please, 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 please take a screenshot, tag it on your Instagram story, tag friends that invest. It helps us grow the podcast so much. And what's better than more women listening to the podcast, learning how to get better with money, and just having more choice. So with that, I'll see you next week.